Good Thursday afternoon. It's 4 o'clock in time for Sports for CLE. Thanks for joining us. A little later in the show, we'll talk about the Cavs getting ready for a home game against the Memphis Grizzlies. A little bit later, we're going to begin, though, by talking Browns. Let's welcome in Quincy Carrier, host of Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, I know we've kind of talked about this somewhat in the past. The Deshaun Watson era, for all intents and purposes, it starts with this upcoming season because he'll be there for a full year. What are the expectations? What do you think the Browns expect? What should fans expect from the Deshaun Watson era?
Well, when I say expectations, I think sometimes there becomes this like equivalency to what they should do versus what they have to do. And when I'm talking about expectations in this scenario, I'm talking about what they got to do, what they have to accomplish in order for this to be justified. And they got to make the playoffs, right? Like, they got to make the playoffs. And I think that's for this year especially. Every year creates its own challenges, but this year, you got to make the playoffs. You have to make the playoffs. If you make a run or not, that's debatable depending on how it happens, but you got to make the playoffs. So I think that's going to be the expectations going forward is, hey, man, this is a team that should make the playoffs on a consistent basis, and they should do so. Yeah,
and if they don't, it will be a disappointment. You don't pay a quarterback what they're paying Deshaun Watson to not be one of those teams. So in order for the Browns to do that, offense has to be elite. What do you think they need to do to fix the offense with Deshaun Watson?
I think they just need to – I think what happened was they ran an offense that was kind of the regular Browns offense. And when guys are like Jacoby Brissett, Baker Mayfield, that level of quarterback, I think it's fine. But then when you have somebody in there who's capable of doing more and not just capable, wants to do more, there tends to be different roadblocks in place for that offense. We talk a lot about Kyle Shanahan having success with low-level quarterbacks or guys who are perceived to be low-level, but we've never really seen what he looks like with the franchise-level quarterback or a quarterback who could do more. And when we have, it hasn't been the most promising results. I mean, usually look at what he's done with Trey Lance over the years, and it hasn't been what you would want it to be, right? So when you look at Kyle Shanahan's record of that, I mean, like there's the RG3 thing where he got him hurt, but when you look at Kyle Shanahan, and he didn't really even get the most out of Kirk Cousins because Kirk could do more than what is structured. And I think you look at that offense and you say, hey, what are the things in this offense that doesn't work for quarterbacks that are above this level? And I look at Matt LaFleur and what he did to that offense in Green Bay, and I think that's the prime example of what you want to change to, which is you want to add more elements of what Deshaun Watson wants to do. When you trade for a quarterback that's the caliber of Deshaun Watson, it's the same thing with any quarterback that's at this level across the league. You aren't really running anybody's offense. You're running that quarterback's offense, right? Remember Peyton Manning got moved to Denver, and people were making a big deal about the offensive coordinator being this and that, and it's like, what offense did they run? It was like, I think Mike Shanahan was there, but they were running Peyton Manning's offense, right? It's going to be the offense that quarterback wants to run because you're going to run the concepts that quarterback's comfortable with from the formations that quarterback's comfortable with. So I think it's going to be a whole offseason of just doing things that Deshaun wants to do and he's comfortable with because that's who's going to be the quarterback for most of the season, not Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, and it will be a big difference. You mentioned Peyton Manning. He got Adam Gase a couple of head coaching opportunities. So that's just remember that. That's to illustrate your point. This is an interesting graph. We used it yesterday. I want to take a look at it again. Average time to throw versus average receiver separation 2022. X-axis is the one that's the average time to throw. Y-axis, average receiver separation. So that is the up and down. And you see the Browns receivers, the worst in creating separation. Now, people pointed out the Bengals' separation wasn't great, but neither was their time to throw. So he got it out of his ball, got the ball out of his hands pretty quickly. Look up top, you see the Seahawks, you see the Broncos, you see the Bears, and the two Super Bowl teams are significantly higher. That's a problem. The Browns have to find a way to get receivers open. The separation means you dump it off and you're going to get 3-4 yards after the catch.
Yeah, then sometimes that stat could be kind of manipulated pretty easily with, like if you have a lot of like bootleg naked plays that work. I think a lot of this is kind of due up to Cooper was hurt half the season. And even then, Amari Cooper, he's a guy who gets open. He's not going to get wide open. That doesn't really tend to affect his production. And the same thing with Donovan Peoples-Jones. So open's kind of a relative term when it comes to separation, because you could get a lot of separation. Like I saw that the Bears were on that list. It was a team that got a lot of separation. But also, Chase Claypool was terrible this year, right? Like, he was awful for them this year. I think he had like 110 yards in like 8 games or something like that. So it is a relative term. What they need to do is just figure out, I don't know if the guys need to get more separation, but they need to figure out a way for the quarterback to be able to be in an offense he's more comfortable seeing who he wants to hit and hitting those guys, because I don't think the offense was that bad of a problem. I don't think the roster is an issue right now. We're paying a lot of guys on that offensive side of the ball. So I think they're going to have to find a way to make do with what they have there. And that just means making some adjustments when it comes to how this thing is ran.
All right. I think they'll probably look for another wide receiver. I could be wrong. Let's take a look at some of the wide receivers. So one free agent every team should prioritize signing in the offseason, CBSSports.com. Browns, they go with Allen Lazard. Wide receiver market isn't exactly stacked, which works in Lazard's favor. Soon-to-be former Packer, career year in 2022. Got out of the shadows of Devontae Adams. 60 catches, 788, 6 touchdowns. He's only 27. PFF projects him to get a contract, 3 years, $33 million, and $21.5 of it guaranteed. It's probably out of the Browns' price range. I don't think they're paying another wide receiver $10 million. Do you?
Well, I mean, like if they extend DPJ, right, that has to be about $10 million there. So it's going to be tough to get a wide receiver and justify getting one in free agency or even in a trade. They have 4 contracts, right? If you bring back a center, even if you don't bring back a center, Nick Harris is going to be the center for this year. That's a 1-year deal because he's on the end of his rookie contract. So you don't really have a long-term solution there. I think the solution for the Browns wide receiver problems is you're going to have to expect David Bell to take a step. Maybe you're going to expect Michael Woods to take a step. And maybe you draft somebody who could be a speedster. But I don't know, because the money is so high at wide receiver. We're talking about wide receivers get paid $30-40 million a year now. And that raises the price of everybody. So even if we look at who's getting paid what, like a Marquez Valdez-Scantling, right, who's at like $10 million, that's similar production to what DPJ has gotten you over the years. And even then, that price has probably gone up significantly over the last 2 years. So it's just hard to tell right now.
All right. I got another one for you. Paris Campbell, this Pro Football Focus, he's a guy that's kind of ascending. So they project him at $7.75 million a year. He did pretty well this year. He kind of took a step up in his ascending. So they say 3 years, $23.25 million. Gives you a little bit of a speed guy, is kind of an underneath slot guy. I think that helps what you might do. You buying that, or you staying with you don't know if they find a way to get Paris Campbell? I got one more for you, too, after this.
Yeah, I mean, Paris Campbell, again, all these guys would be nice. And theoretically, you could put them on the Browns and they would be a better team because of it. But I'm just not sure if the need, what they need is somebody who's fast to make defenses think about the over-the-top threat. But even if you get Paris Campbell, I don't think it's going to really stretch much different from the defense if you just get somebody who is on paper fast. So it's a cost benefit thing. I didn't watch the Browns and think, hey, you know what their problem was? They couldn't throw enough deep balls. I felt like the problem with them was they couldn't figure out the red zone passing stuff. That seemed to be an issue right there. And I don't know how Paris Campbell fixes that, right? If I'm going to spend money for wide receiver, I want somebody who I know if I can go into the red zone and feel confident about throwing them a fade or something, they can come up with it. Yeah, I'll pay a lot of money for that guy because that guy's going to score a lot of touchdowns for this team. But Paris Campbell, we're talking about $7 million for a guy who, at best, the production is going to look like, 600 yards, maybe 2 touchdowns? I don't know how much money that's worth. Especially when you have David Bell on the roster still, you have Donovan Peoples-Jones on the roster who you might have to pay, and you have other guys like Mike Woods could do that. I think Mike Woods is capable of doing that. I don't think it's going to take a free agent to come in and give you that level of production.
All right, I got one more for you. This one's a trade, though. I think there's a guy in New York that might be wanting out of the Jets. Now, you see Elijah Moore. They did get a new offensive coordinator, but Moore was a high draft pick. Then they went out and they drafted Garrett Wilson. They signed Corey Davis, and Moore was dismayed with his role within the Jets offense. Moore's a speed guy. He's a young guy. He's not going to be very expensive, and he could be headed out of New York. There were a couple of games there where he was a healthy scratch later in the year. He did come back and play some. That's a guy, again, that I'm intrigued by.
Yeah, now he would be interesting because he's still on his rookie contract, right? Like that's more or less the lines of where you're going to be looking at this. The price of getting a new receiver versus the production of it, I don't think is going to meet the value proposition of this front office. But a wide receiver under their rookie deal, that makes a lot more sense because Elijah Moore, he could just be somebody you bring in. And if he blossoms, hey, you have 2 more years under contract of him. So that's something I think they're gonna prioritize more are deals like those versus deals with either already pre-made expensive contracts or new deals to wide receivers who need new contracts.
Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll take a look at some of the Browns' current roster, who could be staying, who could be going. Sports4CLE, will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery, Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier, host of Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, I know you've addressed this on your show. 3 players you think the Browns should be ready to give up on, guys that have to go, you think?
Yeah, I'm like Anthony Schwartz, right? I can't go into another year and we're like, hey, Anthony Schwartz, he's going to be this deep threat. We just got to wait another year for him. I think we've seen enough here, right? And I know people want to give him a chance because Watson's here. Maybe that changes how he plays. When Watson was here, he was out here dropping balls that were getting turned into interceptions. So, like, I don't know what else. Like, Watson's not going to help him catch the ball. You know what I mean? Like, he's got to catch the ball. I think another player in there, Tommy Togiai, I think his limitations aren't really his fault or up to him or work ethic or anything like that. It's just he's just not good enough. He's not athletic enough to be the size that he is at defensive tackle, and he's not big enough to live with the level of athleticism that he has. He's in that uncanny valley where you would be if he played in a different league where the talent level is just a smidgen less than the NFL, he would be a really good player for somebody. But he plays in the NFL, unfortunately. Browns are an NFL team. That is fortunate. But unfortunately for him, he is an NFL team. That's what the talent level is. And he just don't have it. And that's a problem for him. So, those are 2 of the players I was thinking of that were like, hey, it's about time that we let this one go.
And, it's another guy that kind of falls into that area is Jacob Phillips. He hadn't been able to stay healthy, and those are all draft picks. And, Andrew Berry in the front office and Kevin Stefanski have given draft picks, a lot of leadway. They have to be, for lack of a better term, more cutthroat, because this is it. You got to come out and you got to play well and you got to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and this is what it is. And look, that's the fortunate thing, and that's a sign that, hey, we're doing the right things as an organization. Is that we're not sitting here talking about, hey, this guy didn't get a fair shake. We're talking about, hey, man, I feel like we're giving these guys too much of a fair shake at this point. So that's a flip from what we've been used to,
What do you think about John Johnson? Is that a guy that you keep? Do you think the Browns move on from him? If they cut him post June 1, it's like $9.75 million, something in that neighborhood. Do you see him on this team, or do you think they move on from him?
If you would have asked me this question right after the season, I would have been like, yeah, of course you would get rid of John Johnson. But the more I think about it, the more I end up on the side of, maybe you should probably keep John Johnson, because he's not that expensive. $13.5 million for a safety is not that expensive, especially one that was like, before he signed here and was asked to do stuff that he wasn't used to doing. He was a top level safety at doing that, and a very impactful player. So I would love to know what Jim Schwartz thinks, but I would think that, hey, you look at a guy like John Johnson, you see where his snaps have been, you see what the production has been, and then you see where his snaps were in LA, you give him those snaps here, and you feel like, hey, you can get that same level of player. The reason I think that is because the more and more I think about it, I don't know if I can trust what I saw from Grant Delpit last year, just because Grant Delpit has kind of proven himself to be an up-and-down player. This is the second year in a row where we're talking about Grant Delpit having a shining end of the year, and that's going to roll into the better next year. And then he kind of started out this year flat, and we can't afford for him to start out flat, take that chance on him. I'd rather put John Johnson in a position where he's been at his whole career, to be the impact player that he's been, and instead of relying on relying on Grant Delpit to be something that he isn't, which is, be something that he wasn't for most of his career. And that's my reasoning for kind of wanting to keep John Johnson. And the savings, like, we think about if we try to save money with him, you might save $9 million, but like, who are you going to sign to play free safety for this team under $9 million if you really want to save money? And that's the big question.
All right, we'll deal with that in a couple of segments. We did the exercise with free agent wide receivers. Let's do that same exercise with free agent defensive tackles. So this is from ESPN.com. Browns offseason predictions. Browns will sign free agent Yannick Ngakoue to a big contract in another attempt to bookend a pass rusher that can help take attention away from Myles Garrett. Might need to restructure Garrett's contract to free up short-term cap space to make it happen. Ngakoue had 9.5 sacks in 2022 with the Colts. PFF projects his contract 2 years, $25 million, 20 of it guaranteed. That is a similar deal. It's actually less than what they were paying Jadeveon Clowney. Let's look at another one. So I gave you that one. There's Ngakoue. Another one that is out there is Daron Payne. Now, PFF projects his contract to be a little bit higher. 4 years, $80 million, 55 guaranteed. I don't think there's anywhere they're doing that, but again, we'll get back to that in a minute. Another one, Pro Football Focus, Sheldon Rankins, projected contract coming for him, 2 years, $12 million, $8 million guaranteed. And we do know, Quincy, that Jim Schwartz likes a lot of these guys. He likes to rotate them in. What do you think about Ngakoue at roughly $12.5 million, Rankins at $6 million?
I wouldn't be upset with it, right? Like, if you can get Unique at that price, I don't know if you can. He wasn't the most productive over the last couple of years. Like, he's not the Unique Ngakoue of old that we think about. I would also change our thinking on this. Is like, hey, when it talks about like, hey, we need to take attention away from Myles Garrett, is anybody doing that? Like, realistically, who's out there that's going to take attention? You could put TJ Watt on the other side of Myles Garrett. They're still going to be focused on Myles Garrett. He's Myles Garrett, right? So at some point, we can't go broke trying to take attention from him. when the way to take attention away from Myles Garrett is what Jim Schwartz's job is, which is, hey, we got to do overloads. We got to do this. We got to do things schematically in order to free up Myles Garrett to single teams. Because Jadeveon Clowney, as much as complaints that people going to have about how he handled the end of his run in Cleveland, he was as good as they come to bookend with Myles Garrett. And it didn't free up Myles Garrett. He was still number one in double team rate that whole time. He was just very good at breaking them. That's going to happen. He's that level of player. So the way you free up Myles Garrett is you try to put Myles Garrett in positions where the offense has no choice but to block him single team. And yes, players who can gather more attention do help with that. But Yannick Ngakoue is not at the point of his career where people are like, we got to double him. You know what I mean? And nobody that you're going to get at a decent price, and free agency is at that point. Maybe you draft somebody who requires a double team, but even then, requiring a double team when Myles Garrett is out there, a lot of teams will just live with it.
Well, the other thing is get guys that can win one-on-one matchups and make the offense pay. And you saw everybody else had about the same number of sacks as Myles Garrett a season ago, and that can't happen. We're going to take a timeout. Quincy Carrier and I will be right back. We'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. We'll also talk about some guys that might take steps forward next year for the Browns. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier, host of Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, this is Mike down in West Virginia. I've been thinking about this tackle situation with Jed Wills. Obviously, Conklin's going to be back on a big contract. This is kind of Wills' prove-it year coming up. But I've called and addressed it before. The guy has no motor whatsoever. He gives up on plays early and everything. But let's get beyond that. What I'm thinking is Joe Bitonio, he has a chance to be spoken of right up there with Joe Thomas by the time he's done as a Brown. He played tackle, I think, in college. There were times where we entertained moving him to tackle. With Joe's ability, durability, reliability, and that nasty motor he's got, why not go ahead and move him to tackle? Try Jed Wills inside at left guard to kind of protect him, and then he knows when he pulls that he has to keep going and get to the second level. Maybe he won't give up on plays so bad. And then if this works out, then that will make Joe Bitonio, his legend, grow even further as a Cleveland Brown and really probably cinch him as a Hall of Famer. Interested to hear what y'all have to say about that. You guys take care. Love the show.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Quincy, they toyed around with, and Joel Bitonio has played left tackle and played it well. Jedrick Wills has not been, he hadn't lived up to the 10th pick in the draft. He hasn't been god-awful. And I think if you move Joel Bitonio, you're weakening that position, and you're not putting him, he's a guard now, and he's one of the best guards in the NFL. So I don't think you move him.
Offensive linemen aren't interchangeable. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just move a guard to tackle because you think one would, like, that's just not at this point in their career, right? Joe Thomas is somebody who would know a lot about this subject. I mean, he talks a lot about, hey, you know, maybe coming out of college, you could switch positions for some of these guys, but once they get past their first, second year in the NFL, they play the position they play. You know, even something as simple as moving from right to left tackle in your mind where it's the same position, just flipped, that's not even a doable change. I mean, remember when Andrew Villanueva was on the Ravens and they tried to flip him to right tackle late in his career? He was awful right there, right? Like, it's not something that you can just change. It is a completely different position. I think we do this with football a lot where positions are similar enough that we think that anybody can do them. And in emergency situations, we do have some people do them. But that's not the same as starting at that position, right? Joe Bitonio doesn't want to play left tackle long term. He barely wants to do it in the emergency, right? Like there have been times when the Browns have run out like a third string left tackle because Joe wants to play left guard because he's a guard, right? That's the position that he knows. The positions on the offensive line aren't just something we can swap around and change. It's kind of like the secondary. We're like, oh, this guy's good at corner. Let's just move him to safety. Not really how that works, right? You can't just move somebody to safety. So we got to look at this more practically, and the practical way to look at it is Joe's position is left guard. He's not interested in switching positions late in his career. And I don't think it would be beneficial to have one of your best players to switch positions, right? Would you want Donovan Peoples-Jones or Amari Cooper to switch to running back? Like, no, because they're good at wide receiver. So they should stay at the positions that they know how to play. Jed's got to play better. He's got to figure out what's going on with him mentally, that he is consistently giving this bad look out there that he doesn't have a motor. And that's up to him. And he will decide that. If he can't do that in the contract year, I don't know what he's going to do. But that's up to him. And that's going to be what determines that position. We can't just switch Joe Bitonio to left tackle because that's just not practical. And it's not really a useful solution, in my opinion.
All right. This from CBSSports.com again. Most important free agent for every team. For the Browns, they say Ethan Posick. Seamlessly fit in as the anchor, big name. Front 5-year run with the Seahawks. Prioritizing the line is a key if they want to remain a run-heavy attack and/or oversee Watson's return to form. Pro Football Focus contract projects him to get 3 years, $21 million, $11 million guaranteed. They do have Nick Harris. If it is in fact $7 million a year, what are your thoughts? If the 3 years, $7 million, do you think they do that? That's, again, you got big contracts with Conklin, Bitonio, Teller.
3 years, $7 million isn't that bad for him. But I think the question you have to ask yourself is, was he good because he's really good and people just didn't know this? Or was he good because he was between Joe Bitonio and Wyatt Teller? If the answer is anywhere close to the latter, then it don't make sense to pay that dude $7.5 million because you can put anybody there. Or find somebody else next year that can do that. So we'll find out what they feel like the success was rooted in, because that's usually going to be what determines where this contract gets paid out.
Yeah, I agree. That's and again, there are worse things than being the guy in between Teller and Bitonio. Again, a topic I know you've addressed on your show. Two second-year players to watch that you think could jump and pop.
Second-year players, Perrion Winfrey is somebody I find very interesting, right, in this new defensive system. I think he has all the tools to be great, and I think Jim Schwartz is the right kind of person with the right experience to help him out. David Bell and Michael Woods, I would be interested in them having pretty good second years, because what we don't think about is like Amari Cooper, Nick Chubb, and Donovan Peoples-Jones are who they are, right? And that's a good thing. They're very good players, but they are who they are in terms of what they are used to doing at that position. What Deshaun does at that position is a little bit different. So what he's going to have the opportunity to do with David Bell and Michael Woods is he's going to have the opportunity to mold these guys in his image. And I think those are going to be the two that benefit the most from his extracurricular playmaking, right? Where he's able to break out here and slide here. Where Amari is used to doing the scramble drill one way. He's had success doing it one way. He will continue to do it one way, and it will be successful every once in a while. Same thing with Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think these are the guys who are going to be able to have that chemistry with Deshaun Watson, because they're not unlearning anything to be able to get there. They're just learning what Deshaun wants them to do, and I think that's powerful in their development.
Quincy Carrier and I going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll take a look at the safety position, some of the free agents that are out there. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier, host of Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. So earlier in the show, talked a little bit about, do the Browns decide to stay with John Johnson III, or is he a post-June 1st cut to save $9.75 million? If they cut him, they got to look at safeties. Here are some free agent safeties, and this one will drive Browns fans crazy. Jordan Poyer was a special teams guy and has developed into a pretty good safety for the Buffalo Bills. They project his contract 2 years, $8.5 million. Another guy that will certainly get some looks if the Browns do in fact go looking. 49ers safety, Jimmy Ward, 2 years, $13.5 million, $8 million guaranteed. And here's another name to listen out for, Marcus Epps. They project Epps, who is with the Eagles, so Jim Schwartz will have some familiarity with him. 2 years, $13.5 million, $7.5 million guaranteed. So Quincy, you see those numbers, and there's some savings if they do in fact decide to move on from JJ3. And all three of those guys are more of the single high free safety than John Johnson is. But having said that, he's an instinctual player who may be more suited to play in Jim Schwartz's defense than he was in Joe Woods.
Yeah, we know that John Johnson, like when he's playing at his highest level, he's a Pro Bowl level player. Like we can't say the same about like Mike Epps or Jimmy Ward. Jordan Poyer, he's been close to that level. He was a former, I think it was an undrafted free agent that was here for a while, right?
Yeah.
But you know, to me, the question is this: how important is free safety in this defense? Right? Like that's got to be the question they got to figure out. Is free safety one of those positions that you're going to emphasize, or are you going to use strong safety as an extra linebacker position? That's going to be more important for a lot of the things that you want to do, which is crash up front and get into run fits. If that's the case, keeping John Johnson makes more sense, and then figuring it out. You know, maybe you keep John Johnson and then you figure out a way to add one of those guys at $6 or $7 million. And then you figure out a role for Grant Delpit, or you feel like, hey, man, do you feel like Grant Delpit can give you a similar level of performance than any of those guys on that list, and you could just keep John Johnson and put him at his natural position? That's going to be what Jim Schwartz has to figure out. I don't think that spot. I think a lot of people are freaking out about free safety. I get why, because the communication issues made free safety seem like a bigger problem than it was, but I think it was the communication. And I don't think it's going to be that hard of a hole to plug. I think you have some options there. I think Grant Delpit could be interesting for that free safety spot in a different defense.
This is interesting as well. Tom Pelissaro tweets, the Saints are interviewing Joe Woods for the defensive coordinator position with the New Orleans Saints. Woods was on Dennis Allen's staff with the Raiders back in 2014. So, again, it didn't work out here. Joe Woods always seemed like a decent guy. For whatever reason, it just didn't work out here. So it's good that he's still thought of in the defensive coordinator realm.
Yeah, I mean, this could be one of those situations where it's like I'm doing him a solid by, making sure that there's a value there. So maybe he doesn't get the defensive coordinator job, but he does get like an assistant DB coach or a passing game coordinating job. he's a NFL level coach. Like most people who have had him like him. It's just as a coordinator, he just didn't have the success that he needed to maintain that. I'd be surprised if somebody hires him to be the coordinator, but I wouldn't be surprised if he stuck around. I mean, Freddie Kitchens got a job somewhere in the NFL, right? Like he's still out there. Well, I think he's not anymore, but he was after that whole 2019 debacle. So I think there's still some value in Joe Woods as a coach. I don't think he's not a good coach. He's just not a good coordinator.
When you look and hear what Jim Schwartz has said, they're going to have a defensive scheme that is simple enough that a high school coach can draw it up. And you hear what some of the people were saying about Joe Woods' defense. Did they just try to do too much? Was there too many? Did you need a decoder ring to figure out what you were supposed to be doing in what Joe Woods' defense wanted to be?
Yeah, I don't know the specific details of why that thing broke down. I wasn't in the room. But what I can tell you from what I've watched is it looked like they had an issue understanding what it was that they were supposed to do on enough plays to where it became a massive problem for this team. Whether that's because it was too complicated or whether it was because the chain of communications weren't clear, something was going on that these guys on a consistent basis struggled to figure out. What am I supposed to do on almost every play, it felt like, but like almost every other drive, it felt like there was a moment where that happened. Maybe it was the more complicated play calls. Maybe it was the play call itself, right? Hugh Jackson is somebody who had like a famously overly convoluted play call system, right? It could have just been that, where the play call system was just funky, and that caused a lot of problems. And maybe you're even just trying to call in basic plays, and it's getting ruined because the play call, the mechanism, the code that you use to call in the play is just faulty. So maybe it's that. I would be horrified if it was that, because honestly, like that couldn't get fixed. We couldn't fix that. But there are a number of reasons why that could happen. Complexity can be one of them. Communication can be another one of them. But there's a lot of reasons why there can be confusion there. And that's all I know, is that there was confusion at every level on this defense.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. That's kind of what I was getting at. It, for whatever reason, all 11 guys were not understanding what they were supposed to be doing pretty regularly, and that's never a good thing. Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, Quincy Carrier, make sure you check him out. Untitled, unfiltered Browns coverage, always really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. Sam Amico from hoopswire.com straight ahead. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. Cavs hosting the Grizzlies tonight. Then they have back-to-backs on Sunday and Monday. Sundays in Indianapolis against the Pacers. So more than 50 games into the season at this point. Cavs still plagued by some of the same things. Consistency. Haven't won back-to-back games in almost 4 weeks. That is January 4th. And they're not coming through in close games, games decided by 3 or fewer points. Let's welcome in Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. Sam, is it just a matter of young team kind of beat up, trying to figure out how to close out games against good teams? That seems to be some of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, we're still talking about a young primary core with the same guys, and Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, Donovan Mitchell still, even though he has playoff experience and is 3-time All-Star, he's being integrated into the lineup. And then you still have guys like Lamar Stevens, Isaac Okoro, Dean Wade are all playing vital roles. So when you compare them to other Eastern Conference contenders, there's no question the Cavs are the youngest. So that's part of it. You see a lot of veteran teams that have their stars are a little bit older, have been through more battles. They're able to close out games. So I don't think the 3 or fewer point losses are as concerning as, as Chris Fedor tweeted out there, the back-to-backs having not won one in 4 weeks. They win one, they lose one, and on it goes. And I think you need to get that corrected, because that to me is a sign of some bad habits. Just getting into we got to win. We're going to take our foot off the gas a little bit, which again is kind of a calling card of a young team, and they need to get through that and go on a winning streak. We saw the winning streak early this season when they won 8 in a row to open the year. After that, lost to Toronto. So, you don't have to win 8 in a row, but you need to get out of this habit of win one, lose one, win one, lose one. It's just not a good way to be. And then all of a sudden, somebody gets hurt or something, you miss a key player for a few games, then all of a sudden you're riding a losing streak. So it's important that they get that corrected.
Yeah, and to be fair, there have been little bangs and bruises that have kept guys out of the lineup pretty consistently. Donovan Mitchell had the groin and then re-aggravated it. Dean Wade just now coming back in. You've had Garland miss time. So a lot goes into it, but you definitely need to get things rolling. Kind of interesting. So during the practice time, J.B. Bickerstaff talked about criticism that seems to be creeping in about the Cavs.
I don't like, the negativity that's surrounding the group, as if something wrong is happening. There's too many positive things that this team has accomplished to allow, any negativity around our group. Like, the guys are too good at guys. They work their tails off. And, individually, we have guys who are having career years. Again, as a group, there's 7 teams with 30-plus wins. We've got a lot done in a short amount of time. And building a team, isn't easy. You've had 3 games completely healthy. And I think it's, people get lost in the reality. But I want our guys to just understand, all the things that they've done and how good a place we're in right now. And again, we're not done getting better, and we will continue to get better. I'll get better, players will get better, but it's always about this, right? Nobody has started from here and then just jumped to here, right? You all do this, Teams take defeats, in the first round of the playoffs. They come back next year, they're better. That's how this thing works.
And again, Sam, all what he says about, learning and getting better, I agree with. There are some things late in games that you kind of scratch your head about, and you hope they figure it out. But again, he's right. There are guys that are playing really well.
Yeah, in big picture wise, you probably look at the Cavs right now and you think, okay, they should have, 2 or 3 more wins. I think if they were living up to expectations, most people would say preseason expectations, people would say they'd have 2 or 3 more wins than they do now, which is not a big difference. And I know that, of course, JB's referring to probably fans on social media with the negativity and all. And look, fans are called fans for a reason. It's short for fanatic. They expect perfection out of every game during the 82-game season, and that's just not possible. And there are a couple of things that, you say, okay, they need to clean this up if you're a Cavs fan. But at the same time, JB's right on point. Look, we're not supposed to be a finished product right now. We're not going to be a finished product right now. And, you get a Donovan Mitchell and everybody gets overly excited, as they should, But the reality is you still have those same core pieces in Garland and Mobley and Allen who are young. And then you add Mitchell to that. And then you have those young guys off the bench that I mentioned earlier. Okay, the natural progression is you need to just get into the playoffs, which this team, as this core, has not done. You need to do that first, okay? And they're well on their way. They may even be on their way toward home court advantage in the first round. You know, they're not eliminated from the number 4 seed. So there are a lot of things to really like about this team. Are they going to undergo some growing pains? Yes. Obviously not always accepted by fans, but that's the reality of the situation. Is they're probably going to have some uneven spurts, just as every NBA team is having this year, and you know, get in the playoffs and make progress from there.
Yeah, and again, the real NBA season, if you will, begins after the All-Star break that's coming up in a few weeks. So that's when you start pushing towards getting toward your peak. So we'll see. This is an interesting one, Chase Down podcast tweet. Since Isaac Okoro took over the starting position 15 games ago, starting lineup of Garland, Mitchell, Okoro, Mobley, Allen, a plus 20.5 net rating, 123 offensive, 102.5 defensive. The problem is they haven't been healthy. They've only played 8 of the 15 games. Bench minutes have been where most teams have is where the teams have struggled the most. So again, you're trying to figure out how your two main young stars, Garland and Mitchell, fit together. You're trying to solve a small forward issue, and you're also trying to make sure that your young bigs continue to develop. There's a lot going on with that.
Yeah, in the NBA, you don't have much practice time either. You know, it's like a game every other night for the most part. So you're learning kind of on the fly and developing on the fly. And then, you know, as the tweet said, 8 out of 15 games that those guys have been together, that makes it tough too. But, you know, you always are going to have to overcome injuries. They're always, especially during an 82-game season, you know, what you're hoping for is that it's not long or extended injuries to your key players. So obviously the bench has just not played overall well, probably for, you know, 5 or 6 weeks. They just haven't gotten much from their bench. And that's really drugged them down. It's made them, you know, probably makes JB feel like he's got to keep the starters in or really tighten up the rotation. But the nice thing is, you know, when those guys are healthy, when they have most of their guys, and they get some run together, whether it's 4 or 5 game stretch, they've fared pretty well. But even so, you know, they had all their guys the other night against in the loss to Miami, and you know, again, just not able to finish, losing a close game. And I think that was a result of a veteran playoff team facing a team that's never been there before. So, you know, those are just kind of lessons that they've got to learn and take to the next game and the next week and the next month.
You know, the guy that really seems to kind of be taking it up a level is Isaac Okoro, especially on the offensive end last few games. He's looking to be more of a factor and is more of a factor.
Yeah, without question, he's been a guy who, you know, for the first couple of years was just kind of a guy who to me looked like he's just kind of running up and down the court, really not doing a whole lot. But he's improved his 3-point shooting. He's gotten confident in his perimeter shooting, not to mention the fact that he is, you know, right from the beginning, he's been a good player when it comes to taking the ball to the basket, finishing at the rim. So he's gaining confidence little by little. And, you know, look, most time in the NBA, they'll tell you, GMs and scouts will tell you, year 3 is when you're pretty much going to have a really good gauge as to what type of player a guy is going to be. We saw that last year with Darius Garland, and we've seen it throughout the course of history in the league. So that's a very promising sign that Okoro really is playing his best basketball, you know, 30 games in and beyond. of his career. So that's a promising sign for them. It's a promising sign for him that, you know what, I can grow with these other 4 core pieces and be that 5th starter.
Sam Amico from hoopswire.com, and going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, the trade deadline 1 week from today. We'll take a listen at some names that are being bantied about with the Cavs as far as trade goes. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
We continue talking Cavs with Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. Let's take a look at this tweet from Sam. In the event you've wondered why the Cavs are looking for a small forward via trade, analytic that stands out. Starting lineup of Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Isaac Okoro, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen has a negative net rating of negative 0.9. And Sam, that's, again, those first 4 are pretty good, especially Evan Mobley is another guy that has elevated his play offensively as of late. How big of a concern is that small forward position?
You know, with the way Okoro's playing and the way Mobley's, like you said, coming around, I don't think it's that big of a concern. You just need to make sure what you're looking for from Okoro now. Okay, you have this spot nailed down for now, so make the most of it and continue to play, or at least start playing regularly, consistently, and showing that, you know, you're an offensive threat. You're going to be that 3-and-D guy that we need, kind of like a Andre Iguodala type. You know, when Iguodala's younger years with the Sixers and Warriors, that's kind of what the Cavs want from that spot. Now, they also want additional outside shooting, and that's where Dean Wade comes in. He gives them size and outside shooting. Not the defender, obviously, that Okoro is, but, you know, is it a big concern? Not yet, but you want to really find a really good fit next to those other 4, because those other 4 are so good, particularly Garland, Mitchell, and Mobley. Obviously, you know, I don't know about this year if all 3 of them will be all-stars, but they certainly all have all-star potential. Obviously, Mitchell's going again. So, you know, what you want next to those guys, and Jared Allen's going to do his thing every game. He shows up, alters shots, scores near the basket. So you know what you're getting from all 4 of those guys. You want to know what you're getting from the small forward spot. And, you know, look, the net rating isn't a huge deal. That was going into Miami's game, the game against Miami. So, you know, I wouldn't read too much into that, but it is a little bit telling that, you know, we've got to get better in terms of just being able to close out games and win more consistently and play more consistently one certain style.
All right, so the Cavs are viewed as a potential suitor of the Knicks' Cam Reddish. Reports circulating about that. First of all, Sam, what do you think it would take to get Cam Reddish, and what does he give? You know, what would the Cavs be getting? This guy hasn't played, I think, in 27 games for the Knicks.
Yeah, he has not gotten off the bench, right? You know, Tom Thibodeau in New York's keeping him on the bench. First of all, you wouldn't have to answer your first question, you wouldn't have to give up much. You know, you're talking a second-round pick, maybe the expiring contract of Dylan Windler. That would work. The Knicks aren't seeking much, and they can't. I mean, they can't go say, hey, here's a guy who hasn't played for us in 27 games, but, you know, he'll be great for you, so give us some really good pieces. They know they can't do that. At this point, they just need to unload him. So they're really kind of looking for second-round picks and matching salary. What would he give the Cavs? Well, last year in Atlanta, he averaged 11 points a game, through 34, 35 games last year before the trade to the Knicks. So, that's what you're hoping if you're the Cavs, that he could rekindle that and find that and become another threat for you. This is a guy who had a ton of potential coming out and played fairly well in Atlanta. It was surprising that the Hawks traded him, but there's obviously reasons he's not getting in games now, and that's a little concerning. My whole thing, Dave, is if you did trade for him and didn't give up anything but a second-round pick and Windler, then all of a sudden your log jam at small forward becomes even longer, with Reddish and Karis LeVert and Okoro and Lamar Stevens and Dean Wade. Now all of a sudden you've thrown another guy in there, and does he solve the problems, or does he just take minutes away from somebody else? So that's something that I'm sure that they would consider.
All right, this is from ESPN.com. Trades they would like to see happen. They say Isaac Okoro, Chetty Osman, 2 second-round picks, 2026, 2028, to Portland for Josh Hart. They also have another one that has Dylan Windler and a 2027 second-round pick to Detroit for Hammoudi Diallo. So first, let's start with Hart. That seems like an awful lot to be given up to get Josh Hart to me. What would is Hart? Does Hart give them anything that they don't already have?
Josh Hart seems like a wonderfully nice guy, but if Cavs fans get, frustrated with inconsistency from Karis LeVert or Isaac Okoro or whoever, just wait till you see Josh Hart. I mean, he is wildly inconsistent. You never know what you're going to get from him from one night to the next. And I mean, that to me, it's just not an upgrade. The only thing that Josh Hart would offer is obviously he's a veteran. He's a little bit older player. Is he better than Chetty? Probably, but not much. Does he have more promise than Isaac Okoro? Certainly not. And all he's shown in Portland is more of the same, which is, lots of inconsistency. And I wouldn't make that deal, because I just think that you're just making a trade for the sake of making one and adding another inconsistent guy for your small forward spot. All
right. Before I let you go, I know you've written on this. So Kevin Love hadn't been himself. Does his expiring contract become a trade chip at the deadline next Thursday? And also, who are some names to listen out for that you think the Cavs, that if Kobe Altman can get this guy, he'll probably do it because it would be an upgrade?
First of all, on Kevin Love, I think that you have that expiring contract, which is big, which is going to be valued by teams that are, quote unquote, selling at the trade deadline. The team that's most obvious would be the Hornets. They have some big contracts there. Gordon Hayward, obviously one can't stay healthy, but a nice player. The Hornets are looking to move him. If you're the Cavs, you have to kind of be careful about trading for a guy who can't stay healthy and has a big contract. But that would immediately, if he were able to stay healthy, that immediately solves your issue at small forward. So that's just an example. The Cavs haven't had those conversations as far as I know. But there are going to be teams looking to get Kevin Love's expiring contract. If the Cavs can find that they, really are able to upgrade, then certainly they would move that as a valuable chip. So I think that that's something that's kind of under the radar, hasn't been reported much, but I think that that's a possibility. As far as some of the Cavs targets, same as usual. Bojan Bogdanovic, who the Pistons keep saying they're not going to move, which nobody really believes. Alec Burks, also from the Pistons. Pistons are saying they're not going to move him, which is probably not true at all. I think they're really trying to move him, and he'd be a nice fit with the Cavs because he's shooting career-high three-pointers. Heard the name Doug McDermott quite a bit from the Spurs. Another guy who can shoot three-pointers. The Spurs are asking virtually nothing for him other than maybe a couple second-round picks. You'd have to give them some salary, which would be something along the lines of Chetty and Dylan Windler. That deal would work. So those are kind of the lower level guys, other than Bogdanovich, that the Cavs are interested in, and obviously Reddish. I don't think that they're going to make a splash. I'd be surprised if they do anything, really, because things aren't going so poorly that you feel like you really need to do something right now. And I just don't think that they will be able to find anyone who will move the needle and move them out of a first, second round of the playoffs. So they might wisely just wait until the summer to kind of regroup and look at their needs then. Because right now, they're doing just fine right now. There's no need for panic or any of that. They're in a good spot.
And their view is this is the beginning of that window to contend, not anywhere near shutting it. Sam Amico, as always, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Sam.
All right, Dave, thanks for having me, and I'm sure I will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Sam Amico, check him out, hoopswire.com, all things Cavs, as well as the entire NBA. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.